Well, hello everybody, and welcome back to another Doctor Who Big Finish audio drama review. In today's review, I'm going to be taking a look at the latest volume of Ninth Doctor Adventures from Big Finish, which is of course entitled Lost Warriors. This box set is available to order now on the Big Finish website in a number of different formats, including download, CD and vinyl. Although do note the vinyl is a limited edition to 1,000 pressings, so once it is sold out, it is sold out for good. And of course this release is also available as a part of a bundle, along with the other volumes released as a part of the Ninth Doctor collection so far. Naturally, of course, we are only on Volume 3, and yet it is still very, very exciting that Christopher Eccleston is back as the Ninth Doctor. Volume 3, in fact, takes a very similar format to that of the excellent Volume 2, which I absolutely loved listening to, where we have 3 standalone stories by 3 separate Big Finish writers. However, they have an overarching theme of Lost Warriors, which is kind of subtly intertwined throughout the plot of these stories. However, it's not really a plot arc, it's just a theme that kind of ties all the stories together. One of the unusual things about this box set is that we don't really have an outer space story. We have in fact 3 episodes which are historical, so we have 3 different periods, the first of which is kind of a historical grand mansion house within England, the second of which is a historical featuring the real-life Macbeth, and the third story is in fact Metropolis, and that features of course Germany just after the First World War, and then rebuilding the country after the events of the war itself. So if you're into historical Doctor Who stories, this box set is very much for you. As we are still in the very early days of Big Finish creating their own take on the Ninth Doctor, I do still get that buzz with each and every episode, taking me back to the stories I'd endlessly watch as a child. The Hunting Season by James Kettle embraces the fast pace of New Who, taking the listener to the grand building of Dewberry Hall, and the Hawthorne family are in charge. Naturally, we are greeted by a rather large English estate, complete with large dining rooms, guest quarters, and the hierarchical system, with the family being looked after by the staff who live below. The one main exception which makes this episode feel less like Downton Abbey is the aliens on horseback who attack on occasion while shouting flesh endlessly, camping on the near countryside hills. James does a great job of writing the Ninth Doctor, and equally Chris performs each line with such thought and precision. We continue to see a different take on the Ninth Doctor within these audio dramas compared to what we got to see on TV. He's still excellently blunt, a tad awkward, but also has the presence of a character with so much knowledge and power. It's interesting seeing the Ninth Doctor in particular land in a story focused around the class system. There is something very gripping about the Ninth Doctor which isn't present for the vast majority of other incarnations that we've seen, because he is so normal. He's the type of character which in a day-to-day life setting would be simply underestimated and talked over, and probably dismissed down to how he dresses and how he fades into the background, until it's a matter of life and death, and then he should and needs to be heard. The Hunting Season captures that well. Playing a guest role for the Hawthorne family, he simply sits in the background and lets things develop. He goes out of his way to see the servants and the cooks down below because he knows how important they are. He doesn't care about moving between the different classes within the house, and when it comes to interacting with the aliens, he wishes to know both sides of the story before making his very important move. I think that this adventure in particular captures this Doctor's push for equity incredibly well. We don't see too much of this episode's aliens until the very end, but I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing. Instead, we go more in depth with the Hawthorne family and their rather unusual hunting ways. One of the beautiful things about Doctor Who and writing for the different incarnations is that if you had exactly the same plot and story, every incarnation of the Doctor would approach it in a different manner. For example, throughout this episode we have the Ninth Doctor becoming friends with the character of Alice as portrayed by Tilly Steele, and throughout this episode we see a development within their relationship leading to a rather a satisfying conclusion within this story. I think that this episode does a great job of bringing us back to the world of the Ninth Doctor. The plot is filled with action and aliens, whilst reminding us that this incarnation is wounded by war and loss. It's easy to follow and appreciate, with an excellent incarnation at the helm. One of my favourite characters for this story is the excellent Lord Hawthorne, as portrayed by Alex Jennings. Now, he does also portray a character within The Crown. I recognise his voice all the way throughout the story, and then it clicked at the very end when I remembered that he was in The Crown, and he kind of plays a similar character, and he is very good at playing a posh person with a lot of authority within his little world, being his little mansion, and kind of controlling his family. But what I like about the way that he portrays the character is that he is a bit delusional as to the world around him, and kind of there is no world beyond Dewberry House. I think that the interaction that he has between the Ninth Doctor is really entertaining, because you essentially have a very posh gentleman and the rather northern Ninth Doctor being brought together in a rather interesting dynamic, which is entertaining to listen to. We also have Annette Badland returning as one of the cooks, who does of course live within the basement, a really lovely character, and she teaches one of the servants to read throughout this story, as we have these continued links to a book being read throughout the episode. And again, it's a nice commentary on kind of education in the past, and how the people within the house up above would have had education quite easily, and yet the servants below wouldn't have had education, and may have not even been able to read. So it's a nice little way to touch on that and kind of privileges between the different classes. As a story, I think it works very well to get the box set going. It's a very easy listen, and it's kind of a bit, it reminds me of Agatha Christie, even though it's not a murder mystery. It's kind of an episode where there is one person who is blending into the house, who quite possibly could be an alien working for the other side. And I think that's really interesting. It's an interesting concept, especially when in this British manor house setting. It's an entertaining listen, and yes, I really, really enjoyed it. Lizzie Hopley pens the second adventure of Volume 3, which is The Curse of Lady Macbeth, and once more, and as with all three episodes within this volume, this episode is dealing with a historical setting. Upon first listen, I can't deny I was really unsure about this story. To me, this is a Doctor Who story which you can't simply press play on and do other things whilst listening to this episode. This is a story that requires more attention to understand the characters and the plot itself, which is completely okay. Some stories require more dedication to listen to than others. If anything, I actually enjoyed this episode a lot more on the second listen. The sound design is beautifully atmospheric for audio, capturing the historical Scotland setting incredibly well. There's a nice nod in the early half of this episode with the Ninth Doctor landing in Scotland again so soon, which is a lovely reference and callback to Volume 2 with Girl Deconstructed, as written by Lisa McMullen, and reminded me as a listener that we are well on our way to having a whole complete season with the Ninth Doctor as a part of Big Finish, in addition to the Series 1 adventures, which is very exciting. The connection between the Ninth Doctor, Lady Macbeth, and her child, who doesn't particularly talk, is rather magical. You get to see the warmer side to this incarnation, which makes rare appearances throughout Series 1 in episodes the likes of The Doctor Dances, where the empty child finally takes his mask off. He's fighting for people's personal stories, and deeply cares about saving people on the way. This can be from obvious dangers, but also rooting for the underdogs to realise their worth within society. I love the way that Lizzie Hopley balances Shakespeare, the actual reality of Macbeth, and alien science fiction. It's quite a collision of genre, with the locals scared of the possible evil passed down through the myths, whilst the Doctor tries to protect the people of Murray from an unknown alien force. Perhaps this is why on first listen I felt a little bit lost at points when tackling this story, as it is quite fast moving, but still rather exciting. There is also a few fun plot points in there as well, such as the locals believing that the Doctor is an evil spirit, whilst tugging at the heartstrings of those who live close by. Niamh Mackintosh is absolutely superb as Lady Macbeth, and I do always love when we get to see a historical character being placed within the companion role. Her relationship with the Doctor develops throughout this story, and I found it really enjoyable seeing her story get told. It is indeed an interesting adventure, but I can equally see why this episode may not be to everyone's tastes. If you like big alien invasion pieces or technology, this episode may not be for you. Without a doubt, The Curse of Lady Macbeth is one of those episodes that I think I am going to remember, which is very unusual given that the plot itself, I can't remember the ins and outs, the minutiae of what happens, and even some of the characters. I think that is partially down to some of the rather complex pronunciation of some of the rather period names which have been used. Of course, we have Lady Macbeth herself, as well as her real, of course, Scottish name, and it is a complex one, especially if you are not used to lots of characters, which personally I did find that a little bit challenging to start with, but the actual story itself is a lot of fun. I like the way that we're dealing with myths, and I love the way that we open the story with what feels like the beginning of a Shakespeare play, with what quite possibly could be some witches around a cauldron in the pouring rain, kind of trying to summon some type of demon, or I guess in the case of this story, wish away that demon and warn them not to come to their village, which I think is a very nice way to open the story, and the Doctor comes bounding in as this evil force, which I think is very cool. But yeah, it's one of those episodes that I think there's a few aspects that I would have really liked to see maybe used a bit more. Of course, in particular, we have the child of the story, the child of Lady Macbeth, and he draws one of the monsters of the piece, one of the mythical creations. I think that it would have been cool to maybe see the story from his interpretation a bit more, kind of use some of his drawings to really oddly illustrate the episode, which is odd to say given that it is an audio drama, because I love the character throughout the episode. Even though he doesn't talk, I love his interaction with the Doctor, and that makes this episode rather special in a rather similar way to that of The Empty Child, or the very end of the story with the Doctor dances, and that ending climax makes that story special. Kind of has a similar magical vibe. When Christopher Eccleston was first revealed to be returning to the role, one of my instant first thoughts was that we were finally going to get a Cybermen vs Ninth Doctor story, and this is something that really excited me. And then my friend James raised the point that it was really effective having Nine's first reaction to a Cyberman be the severed head enclosed within Van Statten's museum as an exhibit. After hearing this, my opinion kind of flipped an entire 180. My hope for a Cyberman story with the Ninth Doctor wasn't something I was particularly rooting for. Then Mr. John Dorney comes along with Monsters in Metropolis. Therefore, this one's going to be quite interesting. Germany is suffering from the aftermath of the First World War, whilst a monumental production in film history is being made. The Doctor arrives to see history unfold, however it seems the puppet from Metropolis is a rather familiar looking foe. Dorney's writing for Nine is so enjoyable. As soon as he enters the film studio, we are essentially greeted by an excited fanboy. This is a Doctor trying to seek enjoyment in the universe again after the grim events of the Time War. I see this episode as a little treat for the Ninth Doctor, however things go a little bit pear-shaped to say the least. There are a number of moments that really made me smile in Chris's portrayal, and it's certainly got the story off to a great start. Dieter is an expert behind the creation of the infamous Metropolis puppet that isn't a puppet, and the Doctor indeed knows it. The Doctor wishes to protect the entire production team, however everybody thinks that he is simply a little bit mad. I like how this adventure only deals with one rather unique version of Cyberman. It follows a rather similar style to that of Rob Sherman's Dalek, in that this is now technically the first Cybermen outing for new series Doctor Who, and in turn challenges what we know and have seen the Cybermen do in the past. The characters of this adventure really elevate the plot and make it something very special indeed. Anna Dreyfus in particular, as portrayed by Helen Goldwyn, provides a common ground, I think, between the Doctor and a rather stressed production team led by the famous Fritz Lang. The ending of this story is a satisfying yet emotional conclusion, and very much like how I mentioned earlier, the Doctor likes to help those who accompany him with seemingly little actions, and this story ends with a great yet powerful example of that. So am I happy that I finally got a Ninth Doctor and Cybermen story? Yes. Ultimately, I think I've decided that in my own mind as a fan, the head in Van Statten's museum can be the first time that the Ninth Doctor has seen a Cyberman post-Time War, but also I want this story to exist as I've enjoyed experiencing it. For me, I think it's easier to simply create a divide between TV Ninth Doctor and audio Ninth Doctor, allowing for limitless potential adventures with the Big Finish team and the incredible Ninth Doctor himself. Of course, one of the things that puts people off audio is that it is very hard to sometimes stay focused with what's going on, and some people simply can't visualise the story. I think Monsters of Metropolis is a very easy story to visualise. Just instinctively, I couldn't help but visualise the film set, the production, all the people whooshing about, these excellent film sets for this silent movie, and the different characters that are playing these different unusual roles. And then you have the rather excellent idea of a Cyberman in black and white, and if this episode was actually on screen, I could imagine this episode being partially black and white. I think the Ninth Doctor fits into that environment almost seamlessly, and it really creates a style for this episode, which perhaps sets it apart from some of the others. I'm aware, of course, with the purpose of this box set, the Cybermen are the main selling point, but to be honest, I think this episode does actually deliver. I think that it is one of the strong contenders to be the best episode of the box set, because I really enjoyed it, and I enjoyed the characters that surrounded the Doctor throughout this episode as well. The actual ending itself is something of which that is bizarre. I never quite thought I would hear it happen, especially with an incarnation the likes of the Ninth Doctor. I wanted to see a Cyberman story. However, the context of the end of this episode is very unusual indeed, and if you've listened to this one, you will know exactly what I'm referring to. But it was a nice end, and it made sense, and it was played incredibly well, dealing with the concept of the Cybermen as an actual alien foe. There we have it, that is the Ninth Doctor Adventures Volume 3 Lost Warriors, another excellent box set. Personally for me, I think that Volume 2 is still up there at the very top as my personal favourite. However, this box set once again features some rather excellent standalone stories, and it's great to see Big Finish expanding this canon of new series Doctor Who and doing some stories that are a little bit less straightforward. Of course, some of the earlier 10th Doctor stories were quite simplistic in their style and plot. I feel like with the Volume 2 and Volume 3, and to be honest even Volume 1, I think the Ravagers was rather complex for one big story, but I think that they're definitely pushing the boat out with these adventures, which is greatly appreciated. Thank you very much for watching this review. I really hope you have enjoyed it. Do of course stay tuned on the Host Productions for brand new Doctor Who content. Of course, on that note, I shall see you all next time. Bye for now.